Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 2, Episode 5. It's called Cardassians. So spoilers for the episode as always. This one's about a Cardassian child who was left behind on Bajor and has been raised by a Bajoran, but now some questions are coming in about where the kid belongs, and Cisco and the station are kind of caught in the middle of trying to untie this web, with the Bajoran father wanting to keep his son, the son wanting to stay with his Bajoran father, but Dukat, and then eventually the real father of the kid, obviously having different opinions on that. And there's a lot of Garrick in this episode, so that's yeah, it's been a while.
He was fun, yeah.
I thought this was pretty good.
That is as well, yeah.
I think it caught almost off guard with just how intricate it got with how it tackled the subject that it was dealing with. Like, I think there's a scene in the middle of the episode where the kid Rugal is talking to O'Brien, and I feel like that scene was just adding layers and layers to the idea very quickly without any hesitation. It was very impressive.
Oh yeah, and it's so intricate and an interesting debate that even by the end, I don't think even the show addresses whether or not, you know, they made the right choice or not in the outcome. It's just, this is what it is. It was obviously what they thought was right in the moment, but there's no attempt to justify it.
Yeah, I think when you get to the end, I think there was a feeling of like, this isn't making everyone happy, and there was no solution that was going to make everyone happy. And even on a personal note, if I'm sitting here and going, okay, what do I think is the right thing to do here? I feel like technically they did the right thing. Like, if you're going with like, okay, this kid was separated from his father. His father was believed that his son was dead, right? Which is why he was ultimately left behind. But there was actually some nefarious scheming going on by Dukat to make him think that, right? We'll get to all those details later.
Yeah.
But he was basically conned out of his child, right? So he absolutely has the right to get his son back. I think that is pretty definitive on its own.
And there is, obviously, I know we are inherently biased against Cardassians in the same way, you know, because that's, the premise of the show from the start, right? There is no evidence against any, that he was a bad father.
No.
There's nothing to suggest that he had, that he didn't, do everything right for his kid.
So you've got that side of it, but at the same time, this kid has spent 8 years, right? And he was 4 when this all happened, so all of his memory, basically, right? You don't really remember much before you were 4. So
which is directly brought up, this kid does not remember any of this stuff.
No. So he only remembers being raised by his Bajoran father, and he wants to stay with him. That's actively what he says he wants. Which, at that point, I'm like, there's an argument here that this is the life that he knows, and at this point, making him switch is going to cause so much turmoil and make him feel like even more of an... Like, now he's going to feel like an outsider no matter where he goes. He feels like an outsider on Bajor because he looks different and because he's genetically different. But when he goes back to Cardassia, he's going to feel different because he was raised somewhere else. He won't know all the customs the way that he's supposed to.
It's not really his culture right now.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because obviously there's these parallels with it being like an adoption story, right? Of... oh well, the birth parents come back in and want control again, and it's not really how it works. But there's all these extra layers of, well, there's all this racial profiling with the kid that's not really his fault, and he has been indoctrinated to kind of hate his own species.
That's where it gets really, like, not simple, right? I mean, what we already described, I wouldn't say even as that simple because we gave good reasons for why both outcomes technically could be the right one, right? I think here is where, at first it's like, okay, Dukat accuses that Bajorans who are looking after these orphans that have been left behind are brainwashing them into hating Cardassians. And it's like, okay, right, that's fair enough, he's made that accusation. And then that's furthered with some other things that pop up, right? Some accusations that this father not only has brainwashed the Cardassian kid, Rugal, but he's also belittled him. He constantly, we hear from a third party, he calls him trash and he treats him like he's scum and makes him believe that he's scum. However, of course, everything else in the episode after that point seemingly indicates that that's not true. That he does love his son, that he's adopted, his son likes being there, but at the same time, this kid's attitude towards Cardassians is very visceral in its hatred. It's very much, I wish I wasn't Cardassian because they're clearly monsters. And you can understand why that would naturally be a sentiment that would come from living with the Bajorans, because the Bajorans were they're the place that was invaded, that was occupied, that was enslaved. Of course they're all going to have nasty things to say about Cardassians. And I suppose the question is, at what point is he just picking up all the things that's naturally going to be said around him? And what point does that become active trying to brainwash him and trying to stamp it out of him kind of thing? I don't know. It's...
And I don't know. Like, I honestly think with the way the father is in this episode, I think he probably was actively pushed towards those views. Like there was a little bit like brainwashing might be a strong word, but encouraged to believe, to believe anti-Cardassian propaganda, maybe.
Yeah.
But not to the extent that the other guy says that, oh, he was mistreated and was, personally attacked by his family. I don't that seems to be, a little bit just...
That seems to be the cat paid someone off.
Yeah.
That's some nasty stories.
I think that's part of why this is so interesting, is there's a lot of misdirection that, we don't know all of the details, really.
But so despite everything we already said about him wanting to stay with his father, we also have to acknowledge the fact that Bajorans, when they look at him, they see a Cardassian, and he is treated as an outsider. Maybe not by his parents, but by everyone else. He's instantly looked at a certain way. And we actually see some examples of that, not with him in this episode. We see that with Garak, because Garak goes down to the planet at one point with Bashir, and instantly everyone, like the kids that aren't Cardassian run away from him, thinking, it's a Cardassian, he's going to come get us. So there's an argument to be said that even if he doesn't want to go back to Cardassia, it may actually be healthier for him in the long run if he's around people who look the same way he does, so he's not treated this way. But again, the wrinkle we've already mentioned, he's already grown up here and has already got such an opinion of what Cardassians are.
It's so interesting, because let's say, his father did nothing wrong other than be Cardassian and be complicit in Bajor, but he also seems to have been fairly responsible for leaving Cardassia as well.
Yeah, he seems to be part of the side that wanted to leave, which is not the segment that Ducats was in. He wanted to stay and keep ruling.
Yeah. So okay, Cardassian, but he has that going for him, and he was robbed of his son. Essentially, his son was, for all intents and purposes, kidnapped.
Yeah, undeniable.
Yeah. But so he absolutely should want his son back, and and you're completely on his side. But also the kid is just about old enough to have his own opinion, right? And has known nothing else, and this is his life, and probably should have a say in what happens to him at this point, because this is all he's ever known. He's not old enough to remember anything other than this. Yeah,
he's 12 years old, so that's right on that cusp of you have to take his opinion into account here. He's not just so young and stupid that he can't say anything now.
But also not old enough is fully his decision either.
Of course, yeah. I thought an interesting choice here is that they clearly cast someone a bit older, but I think it works in this case because it's telling us, a 12-year-old Cardassian is a bulky son of a bitch, because he looked quite built for a 12-year-old. But I think that's the point.
Cardassians in general, from what we've seen, they tend to be quite tall.
Yeah,
right?
tend to be bigger. Yeah,
I'm willing to believe that is. Just Cardassian biology.
Oh no, right? Yeah, I like that decision that they've made to do that. I think all of this stuff was really fascinating. To get to the O'Brien stuff, so the whole thing is at the start is that Garak and Bashir are having lunch or coffee, and Bashir's still been like, "Go on, admit it, Garak, you're a spy." Apparently, he's been doing that since the start of the show.
Every week, have a little get together. Come on, this week, come on, just tell me you're a spy.
Just admit it, Garak. And they see this kid arrive, and Garak chooses to go up and say hello because he's the only Cardassian on the station. That's confirmed in this episode. He is literally the only one there. and he goes up and says hello, and the kid very quickly just bites him in the hand, like he's almost like he's feral, like he's not having it. So that gets all the events going, and this leads to the kid, while they're sorting out the custody and all that, the kid is going to go stay with Keiko because she's the teacher. So, all right, I'm sure she's thrilled with that responsibility, but he's staying with her. So we get this sort of segment in the middle, which is made up of a couple of scenes, which is O'Brien coming home. And O'Brien, like, he's been there on the bridge or whatever, but he's not been like a prominent character this episode before this scene. But he comes home, and he's like, oh, hey, how's things going? Like, has he been okay? And Keiko mentions that he was hanging out with her daughter throughout the day. And he's like, you let him hang out with our daughter? He bit someone.
Very safe, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't quite catch the exact line he said, but he said something like all Cardassians have that in them or something like that. It was basically a racist comment about Cardassians. And yeah. Keiko immediately like shot him down and was like, no, don't say something filthy like that. No, you're not repeating that.
I was there all day. He was a perfectly normal child.
Yeah, and I think I like it because we've had this before where O'Brien has had these mixed feelings on certain groups of people because he's been in the wars against them and he's fought them and all that, and he's that kind of old school character where he'll sometimes say abrasive things, but he's always a decent person, and he usually, when it's pointed out or he's challenged on it, he usually comes around and understands why he upset someone by making assumptions or whatever. And that kind of naturally happens here when he has this one-on-one chat with Rugal and starts asking him how he feels, because at first he's just he's this angry kid who bit someone. He's a violent little, no good for nothing character. But as soon as he starts talking to him about what he thinks he is and where he should go, all of a sudden there's all this sympathy because he hates what he is. And like no matter how you feel about anything, you could compare this to someone who's in the closet, being gay. You could compare this to someone who's of a different race but lives around an area where it's lots of other people who are different than them. Whatever the comparison you want to make here is, this idea, especially in this case where not only is it like accepted to hate what he is because they were the villain in this past occupation, the idea that he's been raised hating what he is genetically and having to sort of fight through that, all of a sudden O'Brien's tune starts really changing, where he starts saying, hey, like, I've met Klingons and Cardassians I don't like, but you can't judge a whole group of people because of some bad examples.
It's so interesting because it's not even just what the kid's saying that's getting through to him. I think he's just aware that when he's challenged directly, because he's like, what do you think of Cardassians? And obviously he has his prejudices. He knows he does. He's very aware of that. But he also knows, hey, he's a Starfleet officer. He can't go around just spurting those out.
I think it's not even just that. I think it's the fact that when he's challenged and asked that question directly by Rugal, I think he realizes, if I give the answer that I would give to anyone else if they asked me that without thinking about it, I can't say that to him. That's going to hurt his feelings, and I don't think he deserves that.
He gets very diplomatic, doesn't he? It's like, there's some good, some bad.
Yeah, but I think in a way where he's almost kind of like debating himself to the point where he actually probably has a better opinion about it by the time he's done talking, because he's actually thinking it through. He's discussing the actual moral implications of this as opposed to just seeing the enemy and judging them. And this is such a neat addition to that fantastic episode last season with the Cardassian who felt the guilt about everything that happened with the occupation. I think that sort of building them as more three-dimensional characters, and the fact that we have now this dispute between, and this is something they've done so well with the Bajorans, and now they're doing it with the Cardassians, where Dukat is part of one faction and the father of this kid is part of the public part of their society, and the public made the decision to leave Bajor, and this is pointed out, and we'll get to all this other stuff with the other characters, but it's pointed out, Bashir's like, hey, but Garrick told me that you don't have to follow the orders they give. The military group can... And
they can overrule.
Yeah.
But it clearly seems like, at least my assumption was, they can overrule if they think they could get away with it, but hey, there is still, the popular demand and public perception that maybe it's not wise to start a revolt against them. They by giving up Cardassia, they keep their power still. They don't want to go too far over a line.
And part of me was thinking that this whole ruse that he's doing, where Ducat was the one who had his son taken to this orphanage, even though he's not an orphan, and left behind, and is now trying to bring it up, because it's said outright that this will ruin the political career of his father, of the shame of leaving him behind. It'll sully him in the eyes of Cardassia. But then obviously when it's proven Ducat's behind it all, it's like, okay, both of them are going to want to keep quiet about it now, because now Ducat would have a big egg in his face if it comes out. But I got the impression that part of like discrediting that entire like half of the Cardassian like political system was probably Ducat wanting to come back and retake Bajor, because it kind of feels like he's wanted to do that throughout.
Definitely feels like it's part of the process, yeah. Of like putting the military back on top.
So it's very interesting. It's like, not only did it give us this really human part of the story about, okay, what's the right thing to do with this kid, but it also fleshed out some of the actual world of Cardassia and the politics of that group of people. And so, as far as I'm concerned, even just on those fronts, this episode's a big win. But then you add on to that, you also have the scenes where the kid's father shows up, and it actually, you do feel sympathy for him. It doesn't seem like he's a bad guy. It feels like he wants to reconnect with his son, but his son's like, oh no, you're Cardassian. I can't.
He seems like, he seems like a perfectly reasonable guy. Like, even when it's suggested that Sisko, arbitrate everything, and they're like, oh, well, you won't want that because the Federation has ties with Bajor. And it's like, no, you seem like a reasonable man. You're a father. I'm okay with that. It's very different to what we expect from Cardassians, and presumably what most of them expect as well.
Yeah, other than Ducat, we do not get a clear villain in this. And while he is obviously a clear villain, he's not the one that's like, we're not choosing a winner between him and someone else here. He's behind things like concocting this, but the people we're choosing between, we're being given reasonably decent people who all have just reasons to feel the way they do, and it's very complex. And I think this show, like, the last episode was probably the weakest one of the season so far. This is only episode 5, obviously, but I feel like this season's been firing on all cylinders so far with its complexities.
Absolutely, because no one really wins here. Like, the adoptive family lose their son.
Yep.
The son doesn't really want to go. He hates Cardassians and, by all accounts, loves his adoptive family, but also probably should learn his own culture and learn to not hate himself. And then, obviously, the father was tricked out of his son for 8 years and just wants his kid back. And
I'm realizing now that we're talking about it, this is Worf going wrong. This is, what if Worf had a parent that showed up and took him back from the humans? When he was like in his early teens. Like,
I think that's the thing. This is such a classic story trope, right? The raised by outsiders. I mean, it's especially with the colonizer angle here. It's very even like Jungle Book, right? It's Mowgli in the jungle, realizing he has to go back to humanity, right? That's an anthropomorphized version, but again, it's the exact same story. Doing it here in 45 minutes, and then adding in so much intrigue and nuance with the lore as well on top of that with Gul Dukat. And beyond it just being a situation of circumstance, it being orchestrated, it's very impressive that they pulled it off.
It also makes Dukat look so malicious as well, and such a schemer.
Obviously we kind of hate him already because he's a shitbag, but this just really goes even further with it.
A little moment I really liked actually is so at the end of the first O'Brien scene where they're having dinner, Keiko decided to put out a dish that was Cardassian, right? Because she thought, oh, maybe he'll like that. And of course I'm sitting there thinking, but he grew up in Bajor. He probably has never had this before either. So a wonderful little touch here is that both him and O'Brien don't like it, and they both push their bowls, and their bowls actually, clank together in the middle, and it's almost like this is their first, like, mutual ground almost in a weird way.
It is, but I think there's an interesting element, one of Keiko being, well, maybe he doesn't know what this is like, but I think she's actively trying to introduce him to his own culture. And then the important bit with the two of them pushing their bowls away, O'Brien still tries it. He takes a mouthful and he's like, yeah, I mean, not for me. Whereas the kid is having none of it. He's significantly less open-minded about the situation than O'Brien is.
Yeah, yeah. O'Brien's flawed, but ultimately, you know,
he still gives it a shot first.
Yeah, it's So yeah, okay, now I love it for two reasons, but it's a really nice little moment that works multiple ways, and I think the episode's full of those things, which really enriches the story. Just to go, I want to talk about Bashir and Garrick a bit. So Bashir early on, after he's been talking to Garrick, after he's been bit, he's treating his wound, and he mentions, oh yeah, Ducat called, and to be fair, in hindsight, Ducat called the station about this whole biting incident.
Immediately.
It was like somehow. So
it was literally like he went up to Cisco, told him what happened, and in that conversation, it's like, oh, by the way, Ducat's on the line.
He wants to know about this biting incident, and Bashir's telling this to Garrick later on, and Garrick's like, because he mentions, oh yeah, Ducat, wants to try and deal with some of these orphans that have been left behind by Cardassia, and he's like, huh, that's Ducat cares about orphans. Like immediately he starts like sort of having a little chuckle to himself, like that's the most ridiculous thing he's ever heard. And this leads to Bashir coming in, and Ducat's on the comms, and he's talking to Cisco, and it's on the main bit of the command deck, and Bashir comes in and interrupts just before he's about to say goodbye. He says, actually, Ducat, I would like to ask a question. And I cannot tell you how much I was enjoying Cisco staring daggers at Bashir as he was asking his little series of questions. And once the call was over, I feel like the moment...
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Yeah, the moment Cisco says never... Because he cracks a little sarcastic joke where... And he's very serious as he says it, but he says, oh no, Doctor, it was the highlight of my day. Don't ever do it again. I think that don't ever do it again is the harshest I've heard Cisco sound in this entire show.
Yeah, it was intense for Cisco.
Oh yeah, he was ready to snap that man over his knee like Bane with Batman after that insubordination. So that was funny and that was good, but it leads us down this path of Garrick and Bashir investigating things and whatnot. And the vibe I was getting, because when they go down to the planet to the orphanage to try and look up the records, because Cardassians are very good record keepers, we hear. And he wants to go down and check that. So they're looking at things.
It's becoming more and more apparent that the Cardassians they are the British. Right? In this colonizer story.
English. That's yeah.
No. It was a British empire.
It was, but like Scotland didn't have a say.
They were involved, they were complicit. Don't get out of this.
No.
Look. They have to
whip out the Brexit map again. Look, Scotland never has a say, okay?
This was a couple of 100 years before the Brexit map was relevant.
This is just your pricks every time. Every time Britain does something embarrassing, it's always England.
I'll give you like 80% of it was us. You're taking a little bit of that.
Okay, look, that's fair. But here's what I was getting here. So, like, the woman who works at the orphanage is like, oh, the computer's been broken for a long time, and we're not the top priority for things to be fixed. And Garrick goes, oh, I can take a look at it. I'll get it working in just a jiffy. And Bashir, like, laser eyes. Wait a minute. What
the hell is his past, right?
You can fix computers. You know about the cat. And he's got this magnifying glass he puts up in his eye, and he's like doing some doohickey stuff.
Oh yeah, very very handy tailoring tool.
That's what it says. And Joe, this was giving me vibes of, funnily enough. It was making me think of Shepherd Book from Firefly.
I see it.
Yeah, it was making me think, okay, you were important. We don't know exactly what your role was, but you were important, and you've got like a redemption story happening here with the way you're helping. But you were something big before.
When all the scenes of Bashir being like, just a bit, you were a spy. He probably was a spy.
Once upon a time. Yeah.
Well, I think he might well a bit. I don't think he is anymore. I think he definitely has his own agenda right now.
Yes.
He's definitely playing his own angles, no doubt about that. But he seems very much opposed to Ducat, at least seemingly right now.
Yeah.
Right?
I think best case
he was someone.
Best case scenario, it feels like he is doing things for morally right reasons now. Maybe out of redemption, maybe out of regret of what he was a part of before during the occupation, maybe something that even predates that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. But it does feel like he has like some sort of important role in the past. And there's a moment actually at the end of the custody hearing when Bashir comes in and reveals everything, where Dukat never says anything to Garrick, but he just sort of, as he walks past at the end, because Garrick's obviously responsible for helping discover all this information, he just gives him this dirty look. And you could read it as he's just mad at him because he's helped Bashir uncover this, but part of me was also thinking, how well do you know Garrick here?
They have a history.
Yeah.
It definitely feels that way.
Yeah. So
even just the way Garrick laughed when he heard that that he cared about the orphans.
Yeah.
That was someone who knows what he's like on a personal level.
So even this like B plot, it's not even really a B plot, it's connected to what's going on, but even this like branch of the story is still building so much character and mythology with Garrick and what his past might be, and the relationship between him and Bashir, which is kind of becoming endearing. The episode ends with them sitting down and further kind of joking about, maybe I'm a spy, who knows, It could be anyone kind of thing. So all of that's really exciting. And actually so as funny as Sisko berating Bashir was earlier in the episode, my favorite laugh in the whole thing is when they're down at the orphanage and they're talking to the woman and they're saying, hey, but like, what about the records from 8 years ago? Do you remember like anyone who brought the kid in? And she's like, oh, I wasn't here. I wasn't a volunteer 8 years ago. I was in the underground army. And then it cuts to Garrick and he goes, maybe we have met each other before. That made me laugh so much. Yeah,
me too. That was good. Even just the way he brushed off the so like a bunch of the orphans come out, and one of them's it's like this Cardassian girl. It's like, are you here to take us back to Cardassia? And she's like, nope, and just walks off. And Bashir's just there looking around, being like, do I say something? Even just that moment made me laugh quite a lot.
He's funny. Like he was only actually in like 2 or 3 episodes in season 1, I think, but it was one very early on, and then a couple.
I think it was like right at the start, like maybe the first or second episode.
I think it was episode 2. I think it was the first one, but it was episode 2, I think.
And then he was definitely in one more after that. I'm pretty sure, at least.
But it was very memorable, and it was nice to see him again. And the fact that it lent into this larger story where we're using them for what we should be using them for, which is to really build up our understanding of Cardassians, because we've been getting so much good Bajor stuff. But between this episode,
he was the one with the Klingon spies or whatever they were, right?
Yes, they were trying to buy something from him or whatever it was. Oh, you went mute. Connor's sound has dissipated into the ether. Technical difficulties. But anyway, very, very good episode overall. I was finding myself like enjoying the setup and enjoying where it was going, but as we were going further into it, I was just loving how much more complex the story was getting. Not in terms of how like a convoluted narrative, but just in terms of the morals and the ethics and deciding where do I stand as a viewer. Even I was like, there is a clear answer what the right place to stand is.
There's not. And I think that's why I said at the start, like, the episode doesn't even address whether or not they made the right choice. At the end, it's just, that's it. Kids leaving. And there is no conversation of other characters being like, did we do the right thing here? Which I think is what I would normally expect, especially coming from Next Gen. I think that was something you'd get a lot. You'd have a little scene at the end of like,
I think it's
someone asking Picard, did we do the right thing here?
I do think it's implied though. I think it's all said and looks. I think the way Sisko looks as they're leaving, it's like, this is clearly not just this happy final answer. This is more complex than that. And
right, but there's not just this outright conversation about it, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's taking bigger swings as far as it's and it's not even like Next Gen was light on moral debates. Some of the best things that show ever did was have debates about certain things. But this feels like it's taking more of there's just some sad truths, and I think the key thing here, not just because the cat was manipulating this particular instance, but just in general, even if he hadn't done that, this entire circumstance is because people were doing a lot of things that ultimately we want to encourage civilizations not to do, which is don't invade each other, don't occupy people, don't enslave people, don't do any of this shit. If this is like it's almost like this is like one of the final after products of that. Like this is a symptom of what they were already fighting for years during the occupation.
it's one of those things where the orphans are a unfortunate reality of war and occupation. Right? If there is war and there are soldiers dying, there are going to be orphans.
Yeah,
that's a fact on both sides, as we see clearly in this episode. That's a fact, and this is this episode is entirely just addressing that. Like, yeah, hey, this is shitty for everyone.
Yeah, it's not good for anyone. So, yeah, wonderful. Honestly, the only critique I could possibly levy against it is that Quark's only in one scene, and I do like a lot of Quark in my episodes. Yeah. Same with Odo, but I guess they've had a lot recently, so they took a backseat.
Sure, we'll get them next time.
Yeah, we got all the stuff. So obviously we're doing Next Generation on next week's review, but when we come back to Deep Space Nine, we'll be looking at an episode called Malora, and here's the description on IMDb. Malora Paslar, a new arrival on DS9 with a special gravity-based disability, finds an admirer in Bashir. Oh, that Bashir. Meanwhile, an old associate of Quark's comes to the station to kill the bartender. Okay, all right.
Right, well, the Quark plus subplot already sounds like it'll be amazing.
Quark running scared to Odo and begging for protection is just something I know I'm going to enjoy.
Yep.
That's just all that is. Oh dear. Oh well. Sounds good. But hey, that's our Deep Space Nine thoughts. Really happy to be back to this show. It's really found its footing in a way. Basically, since the last few episodes of season 1, it's just kind of been firing all cylinders. So that is the show. So thank you very much for joining us. You can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you can hit the like button and all that stuff and get bonuses and whatnot. But that is the show. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And I don't know how Odo's shape-shifting abilities would have helped in this case. Maybe he was in the bowl that O'Brien was eating out of, just to keep an eye on what was happening with the kid, just in case he was a dirty little spy. Like, just keep an eye on him.